Hey, we're going a little late here at Forward Operating Base Red Raider. This is the Shaker Heights Experiences May Vary Salute to Shaker Veterans episode on this Sunday, November 10th. If you didn't know, tomorrow's Veterans Day. Anyway, coming to the stage is some notable Shaker veterans we'd like to bring forth. And before, the views expressed here do not reflect the Department of Defense, its related subsidiaries, or personnel. So don't get it twisted. Welcome to the Shaker Heights Experiences May Vary Veterans Day episode. Coming to the stage in no particular order, we got from the Air Force, Derek Burgess. From the Army, we have former Colonel Bill McRae. Did I get that right? Okay. Here we are. We're here to chop it up and salute to service. All right. And there'll probably be some more people coming on, and they'll have to do push-ups. Corrective measures. Mr. Burgess, welcome.
What's happening? What's happening? How's everybody doing today?
You know, keep on keeping on.
Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, cool.
Loud and clear. So yeah, thank you all for taking time out for us to salute you all. And, just kind of talk about your timeline journey from Shaker to the military and everything else. Got a little interesting factoid here. You remember that cemetery across the street from the library in Moreland? I think it's called Warrensville West. So that cemetery has veterans of 5 wars. So of these veterans, 4 served in the American Revolution, 2 in the War of 1812, 1 in the Mexican-American War, 14 in the Civil War, and 1 in World War II. And I never knew that until recently. I just thought it was all Quakers, whatnot. But then right across from City Hall, they do have a monument, World War II memorial for a lot of the Shaker guys that went off to World War II. But anyway, random trivia. Also going to just back announce that the Shaker Historical Society and the library in the city, they did a cemetery tour to hear the stories of these local veterans yesterday. So anyway, back to the business at hand. How you doing today, Eric?
In recovery mode, deep thought process. Hopefully these veterans can help us sort out some of the feelings I'm having and from their perspective, what they see moving forward.
Yeah. Why don't we start off with the top, then we can meander into that. So let's go around. Derek, how you feeling? Temperature check.
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
I am good. It is what it is right now. We get kind of in wait and see mode.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it is what it is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Feel you. How about you, Bill?
I think part of me is saying, what we've been through this before, but the circumstances I think are a little bit different this time in terms of what's potentially to come.
Yeah.
And that unknown, I think, is what's most worrisome based on, who's going to be in that administration or aligned with them, and who's going to act as the so-called guardrails against what may potentially happen. And so I think that uncertainty is what has me concerned, because before there was, at least in some people's mind, the ability to say, well, we don't know. Maybe it won't be as bad as what it seemed. This was like 2016. Then we saw what happened. And now with that knowledge, somehow he's managed to be reelected. And so I think that is what is most concerning to me, is not only has this happened again, but it's been underwritten by people who should know better. So yeah, there's a cause for concern, and I was telling somebody that, all these years when things have been, the late 60s, I can only imagine how people in the late 60s thought, we're almost at the end. We just had a president assassinated. We have all this violence. We have Vietnam going on. We have all this going on in the streets with the civil rights movement. And then it culminated kind of the 60s with what happened at the Democratic National Convention. I'm sure there were people saying, we're falling apart. This nation can't make it through. They made it through that, and Nixon to top it off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In the early 70s. So part of me says, well, we can make it through whatever it is that's getting ready to happen. But then again, part of me says there's always a chance for something that's unprecedented,
Yeah.
and then what? So I don't know, man. We're gonna have to adapt and overcome,
Yes.
Pretty much.
Improvise, adapt, overcome. Real talk. What's going to be is going to be. It's all about how you respond to it. Yeah. It's like we waited for one shoe, the other shoe to drop. It dropped. Now it's like, okay, what's the footsteps? But anyway, here we are. On a lighter note, I guess as people saunter in, we'll just keep it moving. I wanted to start off asking, some of you have been on the show already. I think this will be the first time for Bill, but let's start off asking the neighborhood you were from, elementary and junior high school you went to. We'll start with you, Bill, because it's the first time you've been on the show in a group setting. Yes.
Okay. So I grew up in the Moreland neighborhood on Pennington Road, and it started out at Moreland Elementary School. So, for our year groups, as y'all may recall, they had the busing program underway, voluntary. And so after second grade, the decision was made for me to head on off to Mercer Elementary School. So I left Moreland and got on the bus every morning, and it took a circuitous route up through Lomond and Scotland or Scottsdale, all those streets back and forth. It would go back and forth and up Lomond, past Sussex, and through and pick up kids. And then I got deposited off at Mercer on opening day of third grade, 19, whatever that was, 70 something. And so that's where I went to elementary school. And from there, Byron, and then on to Shaker.
Okay. Yeah. Derek, I know Derek's been on the show. Moreland, Woodbury, Shaker.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys know each other from the Moreland neighborhood?
No, that just surprised me that he said he was from the Pennington area, and I was like, damn, I didn't know that. Yeah, I remember him in Shaker and everything, but yeah, I didn't know you were in the Moreland area.
Yep. I grew up right across the street from Al Hunt, down the street from Bruce Gardner, Greg Thompson.
Okay.
The Arringtons lived on across the street from me.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you know what? As Scott Griffin always says, my mother kept me sequestered, so I was not out in them streets. So, so I was. A lot of people didn't know I was around because I was in that house,
Right.
school, or maybe at band practice, music lessons, or whatever sport I might have been playing, and then I was in that house. So yeah, people didn't know I wasn't out around on the streets.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
That's hella cool, man.
I was in the house before the street light came. Sure.
Oh. So, I mean, looking back respectively, was there any thought, like even growing up before hitting high school, about the military as a career option? So we'll start with you, Bill, because you're the newest to the podcast. So what what led you to that?
Yeah. So
To
I tell
join in?
people, you know, we grew up in the shadow of Vietnam, and there was not, at least in my conversations growing up, not a push for people to join the military. You know what I'm saying? My father had been in the Army way back, in the 40s. He was a little older than most parents around that time, because they adopted me at a little bit older. But he never had said anything about simply joining the military. And it was not something, I don't remember any military recruiters at the high school. And I don't remember, I knew there were some teachers who had been in the military, Mr.
Yeah.
Meschenberg and Mr. Henderson.
Parsaliti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. T, I think Coach T. Kelly, I think he was in the military. But nobody had ever said anything about that. But so I took the PSAT, like everybody does, is sometime in junior year. And then that's when the colleges started sending mail. And my father saw the stuff from West Point, and he was immediately all in. And so when he saw that they had something about an academic workshop at West Point prior to my senior year, and he signed me up for that. And next thing I know, I was going. And then when I got back, it was pretty interesting, what have you, but I wasn't all in on necessarily going to West Point. But he stayed on me, got my application worked up, got the congressional nomination from Stokes via somebody, I forget who it was. I got kind of assigned a sponsor to help me through the process. Then once I submitted everything and got into West Point, the acceptance came back spring of my senior year, and my father got cancer right before the start of our senior year of high school. And so when he got sick, it happened very quickly. It went very quickly, I should say. So by the time the acceptance came around in March or so of my senior year, he was very ill. And at that point, there was no way I was not going to West Point. He was so proud and happy. So I was going to West Point, and that's how it happened. And I wound up going there, and he got to see me in my uniform one time. But that's how I wound up in the military, going to West Point, and then the rest is just history.
Wow. Man, I'm so glad your father had a chance to see you.
Yeah.
That's major. I lost my father a couple months after graduation, summer '84. So losing a parent at that age is quite something else. Derek. Yeah. So when did it come around for you to decide on the Air Force? Was it because I think you were telling me it was you and Ken signed up together?
No, me and Dave Embry.
Oh, you and Dave Embry. Yes. Yeah. Shout out to Dave Embry, who just joined us.
Yeah.
What up?
We were at Central State University, and basically, I think I said it before when I was on the show. I never saw myself graduating college or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting put on scholarship at Central State for track. And they ended up taking the scholarship because I stayed injured a lot. And my mother said, well, hell, I'll send you back to school. And I was like, man, I can't waste her money sending me back to school, and I'm not a serious student. So I decided to join the military, and me and Dave had started talking, and I don't know. Dave, help me, because I don't know. Did we come up at the same time with the Air Force, or were we talking about something else at the time, or was it always Air Force?
It was always there for you. If you remember, we were sitting there watching Top Gun when they first came out. Go over your house watching Top Gun. I said, dang, we need to go to the military, but I ain't trying to fall off no boat. I want to work on planes, but I ain't trying to fall off no boat. So you figure the Air Force is the only branch where the officers go out and fight and the enlisted stay back, fix the plane. So that was the most logical choice.
That was it. Yep, because I remember that, man. You go to the Air Force, only the officers fight. The enlisted just sit back and chill. And that was it.
Oh man.
And then we went to see a recruiter, and he was right across the street from Cleveland Heights High School. And what he got us ready because he somehow he knew a TI. Well, I think he was like a National Guard or something like that. But like he would come in on the weekends and he would treat us like we were in basic training. So he got us together. Dave and I thought we were going to go off at the same time, but we both got delayed. So I went off in April, and that was that. And then Dave came later.
Wow. Joining us is General Jeff Watkins. We did the disclaimer at the beginning that the views expressed on here do not reflect the DoD and its affiliates or its employees. Welcome. Thank you. Sorry. I hope, it took a minute. But good to have you aboard, man. Thank you for taking time out. We're just going around the horn, just, reiterating, the neighborhood you went to, you grew up in, and then what initially sparked the path going into the military. So we got Dave, and then we'll go to Jeff. I mean, it's funny because like Derek and Dave, I mean, the fact that your stories overlap, but with you had no inkling, Dave, about the military until Top Gun, right? Until watching Top Gun.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Idea was to go back to Central, but I owed money, because I really didn't take it that serious, that much serious when I was there to like the last quarter, so I owed some money, could have went back, but it was like I said, almost like what Derek said, I'll put my grandparents in debt just, to keep me going to school. So working, I just had a kid, baby mama, like, working at Red Lobster, ain't enough money. So, you sitting there watching Top Gun, I was like, that's the answer right here. We can go back to school because then, they were paying for school.
Right.
So my whole goal was go back there paying for school. I'll go back there, and I'll get my degree there while I'm in the Air Force.
Oh, right on. Right on. And that was 85?
87.
87. 87. Okay. Yeah. Jeff. So coming up through Woodbury, Shaker, was the military even on your radar back then?
Yeah, like I told when we talked before, my dad was in the military.
Yeah,
I was born in Germany. My granddad, my great granddad were in the military. One of my great uncles, and probably about 10 of my other uncles on my mom's and dad's side of the family. Wow. So it was on the radar, but not something that was top of the radar.
Yeah. So okay. Eric, you got anything to ask at the moment?
A lot of moral area in this thing right now, ain't it?
Oh, yeah. So here's a question for you guys. What do you remember about the day you enlisted, so who wants to answer first? Go ahead.
I got you. You talking about the day we enlisted or the day we got the basic training?
Well, that's the other question I'm going to ask everybody about, like your,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
especially the academy guys.
Okay.
That's a whole other.
The day I enlisted wasn't really. It was a normal day. I remember after I enlisted going home thinking, okay, I'm in this shit now. Ain't no turning back. I didn't did it. What? And I remember kind of a little panic. Then I was like, dude, chill the fuck out. You're gonna be all right. And then I, calm down. And then I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm enlisted. I'm just waiting to go now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it was kind of a panicky thing, and then it was like it was okay.
Bill, so going up there to West Point, Hudson Valley, what was that? What was that? What was that feeling for you when you hit that campus?
So, as I mentioned, the summer before our senior year, I had gone up there for the academic workshop, and you could view the campus. It's summertime; it's really pretty up there, and they give you an overview of West Point. But what they do not tell you about is, or go into any detail on, is what it's like to be a first-year cadet, right? A plebe, as they call them. And so, getting up there. My parents couldn't take me because my dad was sick. So I got my sponsor there and they got me to where I needed to be. And there's a point at which at the football stadium, all the little new cadets, they call you, are separated from their families, and you get on a bus and you get ready to head down to where they're going to be received. And so everything is nice up until that point. Everybody's smiling and, oh, yes, sir, and man, talking to the parents. And then they get you on the bus and it's really quiet. And then when you get down to the central area where you're received is where it all changes overnight. And so then they are blasting you with information and giving you stuff, and you got a duffel bag, and they're hollering and they're telling you, okay, now you got to do this and report to the man or woman in the red sash, and you say this, and there's something you're supposed to repeat. Well, you can't memorize whatever it is that they told you to repeat, so you're messing that up, and then they start yelling at you. And then there's an upperclassman in each ear kind of hollering at you, trying to get you to square yourself away. And so it was an immediate flood of being yelled at, and of course immediately saying, what am I, why am I here, what did I do, who, they didn't tell me about this, what's going on, you don't know. And it's like that for every day of that entire summer, where you're getting harassed and yelled at, and you don't get a lot to eat, and they're kind of trying to break you down. It's a little bit different from basic training, because I did go do drill cadet as a basic training, so I saw how new soldiers were treated right off of the bus. It's a little bit different, but it's unpleasant. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah. And Dave, what about you?
My experience, I was ready to leave Cleveland. So I was anxious to get out of here. I was anxious to leave. Once I got enlisted, I'm just, like I said, like Derek said, we thought we were going in at the same time, but I ended up going in like 6 or 8 months after him. So I was ready to go. And that first day, it was the same, a lot of yelling. One thing I'd like to, while I was a lot older, we were like 21 by the time we went in, 21 by the time we went in. So, I wasn't really that phased with all the yelling, because I knew it was all just to get you prepared, get you ready.
Right.
I had more time laughing at the other guys that were in my squadron that couldn't handle it, and was basically just falling apart because of it. But after another good movie too was Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
Watching the beginning of Full Metal Jacket prepared me for that whole basic training thing. And I remember I got in trouble because I was a squad leader and I was calling cadence while we were running. And I hit that Eskimo pussy is mighty cold. T.I. snatched me right out the lines. You were trying not to laugh, but he was like, no, you can't do that. But yeah, I was ready to leave Cleveland. So my experience, I was ready to leave Cleveland to get on with my life.
Yeah. Jeff, what about you?
Not much different than the other ones. I think Derek is probably the only one who knew my older brother. So if there was any hazing, that I was not worried about being hazed, bullied up, or anything. I grew up across the street from Timmy and Teddy Leffrich, uh, my brother. And my dad would tell me stories about basic training. Um, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Lost in the Woods, for
Yeah.
people who don't know, and it was a unique experience. Went with like four other people from Ohio, so that was good. But I had that chip on my shoulder about from being from Cleveland, and you had
Mhm.
all these other people from other states and countries and everything, and it's wanted to show them that we were, Cleveland had some talented people, some intelligent people. We had fights, wrestling matches, name it. And it was for me just a way to continue to grow and learn and develop. We did have a guy from Africa that I remember. He couldn't shoot, and I remember our drill sergeant telling them to take the front receiver off the weapon and use it as a blow dart, that he would qualify then. And you can't, no way you're doing that nowadays, but
No, no.
not one of us moved. It was a
Yeah,
different thought. Our drill sergeants had no problems putting, if you got smart, thought you were tough, our drill sergeants had no problems putting their hands on you and letting
yeah,
you know that they knew more than you did at that time.
yeah,
So it was a great experience. Um, the people I grew up around with, ensured that you were ready for stuff like that, though.
yeah,
The
yeah,
environment we grew up in, I think we were very well prepared for things like that, or the physical part of it was the mental game that you had to learn how to adjust to
yeah,
and do the best that you could. The drill sergeants played the games of Johnson messed up, so I'm punishing everybody. Now you
yeah,
guys go get Johnson.
yeah,
So you wanted to stay off that radar as well.
yeah. For me, I went in at 41, so I had my midlife crisis. I too came from a military family, Army and Air Force, and I got to say, my first night of getting off the bus at 2 a.m. at Fort Sill, yeah, I was sitting up there shaking. I was saying to myself, "What the fuck did I do? What the fuck did I do? What the fuck did I do?" And I'll never forget my two drill sergeants. Like, they ganged up on me because they were, like Bill was saying, all the information that they're giving at you, and they were telling you empty everything out on your bed, but don't sit on your bed. And I did everything in reverse and opposite. I kept on sitting on the bed, but I was just so stunned, like, oh, this is real now. And but yeah, I will say, to the younger guys that I was going through, in an indirect way, I definitely appreciated, even at that age, like, coming from where we came from in terms of um, just relating to people and having, like, an understanding where they're, possibly, where they were coming from and stuff like that. But yeah, basic training, man. That's definitely where memories were made. Okay.
Well,
Um,
Gabe, you entered at a certain time when it was Afghanistan, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, the
yeah,
wars were
but
were
all the others, it was during peacetime for the most part. Did you have any inclination or have any understanding or think that you might see action overseas or in any kind of conflict? Did that enter your mind at that point?
um not really until I was at AIT at Fort Meade. Um, that's where all the media people from all the different branches came through, and we were student company. And I remember distinctly, I was in the lounge, and there was an issue of Vanity Fair, and it had early photographs from Afghanistan that these two war journalists had taken, Sebastian Younger and Tim Hetherington, who was sadly killed. And that's when it kind of sunk in. I looked around and like, oh, we're going to be going to war, and how many of us may not make it back? So that's when it really kind of sunk in at that time, because in a few weeks later, I got my first duty station, and it was Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and units were already getting deployed to Afghanistan. So yeah.
So do you guys, you got your information from Vanity Fair, which is a magazine. I would think that you'd have some intel or some people, some info that would sort of trickle down to your direction, and that you would know about ensuing conflicts before anybody else would. Is that true?
Well, for me, not at that stage, because I wasn't officially signed to a unit yet until I got down to Fort Bragg. And then that's when you started hearing about who's on the rotation cycle. So that was where that was. Because there were some people I served with, they never got deployed. It really depended on what their MOS was, their job, and stuff like that. So
yeah, like Dave, did that inform your decision? Did you have any inclination that you might be seeing action or going to any conflict?
I did, because I got lucky. So when I was in, I got out in 91. So
Right
when
before
you start getting short, they give you that decision. Do you want to stay in or do you want to re-enlist? So the war started in January. We launched our plane. My squadron didn't go over to Saudi Arabia, but there were 3 squadrons in our tactical fighter wing. One of our squadrons went, and our planes went over there in like August to Saudi Arabia. So I knew what was happening, and I just chose to get out of the Air Force instead of, because they want to be in a war. I was like, I'm not, although again, you're in the Air Force, you kick the planes out, they do then they come back, I wasn't going to be in any danger, but I just really wasn't trying to go over there, because I was hearing about the chemical weapons that they may have been using, supposedly that they were shooting over into Saudi Arabia and all that stuff. I would hear stuff. I was fortunate to have a top secret clearance, so I was getting some information from the inside, but not a whole lot. But it was enough to make side, well, I'm gonna get out. I'm not trying, because I knew my squadron was next to rotate over, which we did towards the end of the war. But I was like, nah, I'm not going. They gave me the choice, so I got out in 91.
How about you, Bill? Because a lot of people at that point in time didn't expect to see any conflict or any action. They were going, like a lot of you guys said, to get money for college. What was your mindset? Was it along those lines, or were you set to be a career soldier?
Yeah. So coming out of West Point, I don't think, obviously we knew, hey, we're going in the Army and there's a potential for something to happen. I mean, that was a part of our class work. We studied war, all the way back, Peloponnesian Wars, all the way up through Vietnam. And so, we had a course of war discussion on the Arab-Israeli wars. So we knew coming into modern times, modern days, that war was always a possibility. It was just a matter of when the circumstances were correct. And we even discussed where we thought the next one would be. So when I graduated, went to OBC, Officer Basic Course, and then in the time between going to Officer Basic Course and my first assignment, Panama had happened. You recall when we were in high school, Grenada had happened.
Yeah.
So there were these little wars that people forget about, but there was always a possibility. And of course, when I got over my first assignment was in Germany. And then that's when, out of the blue, Iraq decides to run down into Kuwait. And then the whole slide into Desert Shield and Desert Storm happened. And I was in Germany, and I can remember as a young officer being over there. Our unit was not one of the ones that was selected to go out of Germany. A lot of stateside units, a few specific type units in Germany. And so we're sitting back there in Germany feeling like, oh, we're missing out, and we're supposed to be in the fight, and I was in an 8-inch artillery unit, why are they leaving us over here? And I can remember because we had old Vietnam vets in the unit who had been in, they never really talked about it, but you knew they'd been through something, right? You could just tell. And so, we had these young lieutenants and people running around. We were running around saying, we want to get over there and send us to another unit that's going somewhere. Don't leave us here in the rear, with the gear. And the old Vietnam vets would be like, take it easy there, tough guy, Killer, you're going to get your chance. One of these days, you're going to get your chance, and then you're going to start wishing that you weren't over there, Yeah. And so I think that's the way it was. And so from the end of Desert Storm all the way through 9/11, there was always a sense of, especially in the units that I was in, whether it be the 101st, especially the 82nd, it was, we don't know when it's going to happen, but within, 18 hours, we might be wheels up. So we need to be ready to go. And that's how we approached it. And so when 9/11 happened, all right, well, we know we're going somewhere. We know we're going. We just don't know when and what configuration. And so then that was our mindset. Then once the deployment started from 9/11, then there was no question. Yeah, you're going back over there, So I was in Afghanistan, went straight from there home. A month later, I'm sitting in Kuwait ready to go into Iraq. Come back from Iraq, I know we're going back. And sure enough, I went back when I was a Brigade XO. Come back, take battalion command. I know I'm going back. Sure enough, within a year, we're back over there. I'm a battalion task force commander on the east side of Baghdad. So it became what it became. You knew you were going. And now how do you get as prepared as possible to do whatever the fight is you're going to do and get all your people home?
Yeah.
So with the Gulf War, it seemed, as being a statesider and being a civilian, the rhetoric or the talk was that we would be in and out within 6 months or a year. And how long did the Gulf War last? How long? It seems like we've been in a war forever, so it's hard for me to remember back then. That was 90, 93, 92, 91?
That was 91.
91.
It was 91.
And then when did it end? When did it end?
It was like the video game war because it was
like
a few
100
months.
days.
Yeah.
So,
it was
over in June. Like
it was August of 90 to February of 91.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember.
Combat wasn't very long.
No.
And they packed everybody up and left out of there. I mean, of course, there were some people that remained behind, but that one was pretty much over quickly. It wasn't like what happened later.
Yeah.
And Grenada with Reagan, that was only a week, and I heard that was kind of like a joke. No one.
Yeah.
Really even spoke of that.
Right. I mean, outside of the people, the units that were there, like there were some 82nd units, some Ranger units, some Marine units. I don't think there was a lot of discussion of Grenada.
I know there was a Shaker grad that was killed in action in Grenada, though.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, he was an 82 graduate. Kip, I can't think of Kip's last name. He was a friend of my brother. So
Kip White?
Was it White, dark-skinned guy?
Yeah.
I can't think of his last name.
Yeah, Kip White.
Yeah.
He died?
He was over in Grenada, and I'm pretty sure he passed. He was killed in action over in Grenada.
Wow.
Wow. A moment of silence for this Shaker dude, man. Wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I knew Kip.
It was I don't know. I can't remember his last name, but real dark skin.
Yeah, Kip White. Yep.
I'm writing his name down for future.
So after 9/11 hit, how many Billy, were you an enlisted man at that point? Jeff, you were, right? Weren't you? Who
After
was enlisted?
9/11,
Yeah.
no, I was a captain by 9/11.
Okay. So
I got commissioned.
how did that hit different? I mean, when that happened, how did that feel compared to what you had observed in the Afghanistan wars and everything else? How did that? What did that do to your experience in the armed forces? How
Well,
did you prepare yourself for that?
well, being in the National Guard was a little bit different in the 90s than it was in 2000. Um, After 9/11, I want to say my unit got tapped because of the things that happened down at Fort Bragg. And I was a company commander of an MP unit, and we went down to Fort Bragg because they had sent their MP units to the Pentagon. So for us, it was a all hands on deck that we were needed to either support some of the bases where they were sending the active duty units to do other things. And then after my unit left Bragg, I want to say 3 months later, they were in Iraq.
Hmm.
So we went from that operational reserve to an actual, we were engaged in a fight, and I highlighted a lot of things for me personally because it showed that the National Guard has some very capable units. We weren't like just a fat slob weekend warriors. We had some experience. We had some capable units. I want to say we deployed after 9/11. We deployed probably about 7 or 8 units. 3 of our MP units went over to Iraq. We had engineer units. Our BCT deployed as well, our engineer brigade. So we were very well engaged in the fight. We didn't know it would last as long as it did because we had some multiple deployments and we were getting tabbed very quickly to go back, like every 3-year rotation. I have some National Guard members that, as we say, M-Day soldiers. They do the 2 weeks in the summer or whenever throughout the year, and they do a drill 2 times a month. These guys were jumping on deployments back to back. They would get home and then jump on another deployment or volunteer while they were overseas. And we have some soldiers with like 10, 11 deployments from 2001 up to 2018. They just kept consistently going. So it changed, one, how the Guard was viewed, but it also changed how we recruited, how we accepted missions, how we trained, because it was no longer going up to Grayling, Michigan or anything like that. It was, you are training to deploy to go to war to help this country. So the mindset had to change a great deal, but it also, I think, allowed some of the active duty members to say, damn, there is some capability there. They're not just a bunch of guys playing soldiers, playing airmen. They're actually talented, trained, very well trained and disciplined. So it forever changed how the National Guard conducted business.
Oh. How about you, Billy?
It's interesting. Jeff talked about the perception of the National Guard. One of my assignments at the end of the 90s was as an ACRC, active component, reserve component. I was a trainer essentially, and we had responsibility for training National Guard units in southeastern United States and Puerto Rico. And so we would go out with these guys on their IDTs, which are on the weekends, and then their annual training, which were like 2 weeks in the summer. And it was interesting to watch because all units are different, watch them and their approach, because by the time you get to the weekend training and get out into the field, you don't have a lot of training hours left. You have 2 weeks for annual training, but you have a lot of things you have to get done in those 2 weeks. And so I remember being in Puerto Rico, and some of the guys in the unit, it seemed that they weren't taking it very seriously. And this was 99 time frame. And I remember telling them, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. You may not ever deploy to combat, and you might. But ideally, if you do, you won't be in a situation where you're sitting there wishing that you had taken this training seriously. And I think what Jeff alluded to was, perhaps a belief amongst some people in the National Guard, hey, we aren't going anywhere. When was the last time they sent the National Guard anywhere? And then boom, here comes 9/11 and it all changes. For me, I had just gotten to Fort Bragg. I'd been to Command and General Staff College. I was newly promoted to major. And so I'm ready to begin my staff time. And I was on division staff as assistant fire support coordinator. And what we did at that point really was train for conventional combat missions where we, as the 82nd Airborne, jumps in to an airfield and moves out and commences to fighting, And I'd been there for, maybe a little over a month. It hadn't been long, but we were already training and stuff on that type of mission. And then 9/11 hit. And so immediately I was a planner. So being a planner, we started receiving information, and everybody, has a TSSCI clearance. And so we're going through what the potential places to go. And obviously we're talking about Afghanistan, and okay, we're preparing. Okay, what if we jump into Kandahar? Or what if we jump into Bagram? And so we're going through all the planning process and understanding that at any moment we could be told to go. We're watching as Ranger Regiment goes down in there. They jump into Kandahar, and we're like, oh, that could have been us. And then, going on from there. So, it was a matter of understanding, yes, we're going to go. It's just a matter of when. And then by 2002, we were sitting over there in Bagram, the division headquarters, and a battalion out of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. So, and then from there, it was just back and forth between Iraq, home, or I should say Afghanistan, home, Iraq, home, Iraq, maybe Afghanistan again. We were doing at that point, it started out, it was a 6-month tour, right? Then we jumped up to a year. Then you might spend 15 months over there. Yes. So there were some units that were doing short ones. Like, I know the Air Force, they do like 6 months or 9 months, I think. And then they come on back. Some of the high speed units, the Rangers, the SF guys, they would do 3 months or something like that.
Yes.
Conventional Army, of which the 82nd was, and all those other units, it got to the point where you were over there and you were over there for a long time. Yeah. And it was, that changed the dynamic, right? And then I remember I told you about all those young lieutenants chomping at the bit to get down there back in 91, missing out on a Desert Storm. Well, for those who were still in, they weren't worried about missing out on anything because you were getting your plenty full of combat time.
Hey,
let me add to that real quick.
Okay.
We had a unit. I don't know if you remember, Bill, when they had the 6-month, 9-month deployments, and then they went to 12-month boots on ground. And there was quite a few units that got caught up in the middle of that, and we had a unit wind up staying 19 months because they were caught up in the boots on ground and how were they being replaced in theater. So there was a lot of that at that time as well.
Yeah, especially for the National Guard and the Reserves managing, because your call-up time was all like computed together.
Yes.
Right. And so, we thought active Army, we thought boots on ground. Anything else leading up to or afterwards was outside of that. We were spending 12 months boots on the ground, but for the calculations for National Guard and Reserve of their active duty time, you had to include all the time prior to the deployment where they're getting ready to go, and then however long it takes them to demobilize. And we weren't, I think overall in the military, had some difficulty initially deconflicting all of that.
Yeah, I wanted to say something earlier. We were talking about Bragg, and you were with artillery. I always remember this distinct detail. When the artillery was training, the window panes would rattle at the housing. And that's a very distinct, unique thing because it was like, I mean, the windows would constantly rattle like Saturday morning for like 3 or 4 hours. It was just a constant rattle. Boom, boom, boom. Anyway, I just you brought that to mind.
I told the infantry guys, don't be afraid. That's not thunder. That's the king of battle. So
Hail, artillery.
There we go.
operate. You can feel safe. That's the king of battle out there.
Yes,
There we go.
Yeah. Yes. I did basic at Fort Sill, so they even though I was journalism, they made sure that you knew about artillery. So military time, deployments, folks got out early. Let's talk about that a little bit with our Air Force brothers. When you decided to get out, what was that like? Were you just? I'll start with you, Dave. Like, did you were just like I know you said something earlier about the threat of war coming on and stuff like that, but how was that transition initially when you got out? Because did you come back to Cleveland? And I'm going to ask you the same thing too, Derek. When you decided to get out.
When I got out, I moved to Atlanta. So that whole situation for me was a little different. From our previous podcast, Quake we became friends in the Air Force, and he came up with the idea to move to Atlanta and moved to Atlanta. I think who was president? Bill Clinton, and we were getting all kind of unemployment benefits and a lot of benefits because this is the first time there was actually had real veterans that were in war. So we were getting all kind of business benefits. I mean, the transition itself was quite easy. Nothing, nothing real dramatic or anything. But overall, it was an easy transition. Now that when I look back at it,
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun in Atlanta, so I don't really have no regrets.
How about you, Derek? Because you were playing football, so
yeah, I was playing football over in England.
Yeah.
And then they closed that base, and I got sent to I went to California, and it came to a time my wife and I were discussing if we wanted to stay in, because I did 8 years. I was in during the Persian Gulf. I was stationed over in England, but like Dave and I discussed when we were going in, we launched our jets from England and they came back to us and we did our thing. So I never even saw anything like that.
Right.
So it came to the point where in 95, I was like, okay, do I want to stay in or do I want to get out? And it was two things that made me get out. I was tired of testing for rank, and I didn't want my kids to grow up in the military. So we discussed it and we said, well, hell, we'll just go ahead and get out. And then we were in California. We didn't know if we wanted. Well, I definitely didn't want to stay in California because I thought California's, they're weirdos. So I didn't want to stay out there. So it came down to, do I want to come back here to Cleveland or did I want to go to Connecticut where my wife was from? And she said, well, hell, let's, I left it up to her. She said, let's go to Cleveland. So we came back here in 95 and looking for a job and working in civilian life was kind of like a culture shock because, you're in the military, you go to work, you do what you got to do. You did what you got to do. I mean, hell, that was your job. You did what the hell you had to do. You get in the civilian world and you go to work and people are trying to hide and come to work and not want to work, and that was, to me, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Go to work.
Right.
You here 8 hours, you might as well do the damn work.
Right.
So it was kind of a culture shock there, and I struggled with it a little bit, and then I got my feet up under me, and then it was all right.
Yeah. Now, Bill, you're the most recent out. How many years were you in?
I did 30.
Wow.
Yep. From the time I graduated from West Point, 30 years in the Army. Well, not including the West Point time, but 30 years active duty.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I mean, was it just like you got to a point where, like, because the little I know, like the upper echelon, I know that's a lot of politicking and, appointments and stuff like that. Were you just like, I'm tired?
No, so, once I got out of brigade command as a 06, a colonel, then you wait to see whether or not you're going to get promoted again. And, at that point, for Army officer boards, everything up until and including colonel and brigade command are centralized boards. And what I mean is you gather up people to sit on the board. I've sat on a command board, a brigade level command board, and I've sat on promotion boards. And you're all looking at the files, and you make your evaluations of those files in the computer, and it all goes in together, and they compute and determine a rank ordering of folks, and then that determines who's getting promoted or who's going to be selected for command of a whatever unit, battalion or brigade. And then they go through the process of determining who gets what battalion or brigade. And so after brigade command, it's a little bit different for the general officer board, how they determine who's going to get promoted for general. So anyway, after brigade command, I went to NORAD and NORTHCOM. I was assigned as a liaison at FEMA. Well, I waited to see whether I got selected, and for whatever reason, I didn't. So, and I can only speculate about that. But at that point, I'd done, however many years I'd done. I was like, you know what? I'm going to run out the string, if you will. I'll see. Maybe this next board I might get selected. Once it didn't get selected again, I knew I wasn't going to. So I'll finish it out. Decide what I want to do when I get out. And then I'll set conditions for that. I'd already been condition setting in terms of, okay, how do I want my investments to be? How do I want these properties that I own? I want to hold on to these, get somebody renting them, and so on and so forth. I've always been frugal. So, I knew I was going to be all right. And you know what? I like doing what I was doing, whether I was at FEMA or even when I was at IG, because I thought maybe, with my experience, what have you, my mentality, I could make a difference somehow, So I did that. And I had no regrets about serving all that time. I met a lot of great people, did a lot of great things in a lot of really good units. So, and every time I go back, I just was at an event that Jeff held down in Columbus for veterans. And every time I'm around veterans, I feel like a connection. Like I may not have ever run across these dudes before, but we have a connection in that we all have common experiences. And so when I go back down to Fort Bragg, same deal. So,
yeah. And Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I just wonder how you gentlemen felt. What was your gut reaction as military people? What came to mind first from a military standpoint? What came to mind after we received the results from this year's election?
Like Bill said, be prepared.
Be upholding the Constitution of the United States, keeping your oath.
Yeah, I know. Well, Jeff, you can't really comment on this, but I'll tell you that as a retiree. You know, the things that we talked about, what we as veterans chose to honor as we gave our oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I wonder, I worry, and I think about how we are in a situation where, you know, there are leaders throughout our elected officials who I don't think would make it as leaders in the military, be successful leaders in the military, just because at the most fundamental foundational level, leadership should be about selfless service.
Yes.
Not self-promotion, not anything other than what are you doing for your constituents, whomever they may be. As a leader in the military, our constituents are our soldiers and their families. And we're dedicated to the mission. And if we aren't, then we shouldn't be in leadership positions. As an elected official, your constituents are all of the people within your district or wherever it is that you represent. And so your goal should not be simply to create a gerrymandered district to keep you getting reelected and then subsequently in power to make money for you. It should be about what am I doing for the people? And that mindset, that mentality, if it ever existed, certainly doesn't exist now. So as a military man, I guess you could say, my thing is comparing and contrasting what selfless service is to what we see from our so-called elected leaders. And it's frustrating because, you know, as a captain, major, lieutenant colonel, whatever colonel, you have the ability to positively influence the organization wherever you may be, whether it's getting ready to go downrange into combat, in combat, or coming back home. You know, but here I feel like, you know, you're on the sidelines. You can volunteer here and there, but, you know, I am not in a position where I can substantially influence anything. And that's a bit of a frustration for me, you know?
Yeah, understood.
So with that said, and I know we've had these discussions with Jeff before, I'm sure the military is a mirror image of society. And when you are put in the hands of the commander-in-chief and you do not agree with his mission or his politics, how do you address that? How do you deal with that? Or how do you think that's going to go with a divided nation? And if I'm assuming that the military is reflected of the nation as a whole, and looking at NATO and all these other coordinates or things that have to do with all of this, where are we? Can anyone put that into perspective where you're feeling from comparing and contrasting your military experience when you're in the military to today's military and today's soldier?
Well, you know, I'll say this, Eric, and I can speak from, you know, having been in as an officer where there may be times when, you know, there are political things that bear on whatever problem you're dealing with. I'll give you an example. So I was a battalion commander in Iraq with the task force, and we've been over there for some time. And obviously you deal with a lot of stuff in Iraq, whether it be snipers, IEDs, roadside, you know, on the roadside, or car bombs, or people throwing, you know, RKG threes at you, the little grenades. And so came a point in time, and now, you know, you remember early on in Iraq, we were thinking we were being told there were weapons of mass destruction, and there were, you know, certain things we were going to prevent this. Now we're going to bust the crowd later on, or something like that. You know, and only in retrospect, or really as the years went on, did we realize that was all a ruse, at the very best, you could say, to justify us being in Iraq. So the soldier asked me, we were out on a patrol, and I was walking there, and the soldier asked me, why are we over here? Just kind of point blank, out of the blue. It was, I could tell he had been thinking about this for a while. He wasn't just messing with me. And as a leader in the military, if you're active, that was not the time for me to give my personal assessment of the Bush administration or neoconservatives, and so on and so forth. But to find a way to articulate to him a reason within the umbrella of my command why we were over there, our mission in the area, and our devotion to our brothers and sisters within the organization, and then the people that lived in the areas that we were trying to secure. So I told him that, and I told him that's all I can tell you about why I look at why we're over here. Now there are, I would estimate a myriad of views, myriad views of the incoming administration, just as there are myriad views about the current administration. But we, as military leaders who are still in uniform, are obligated to operate in a non-political way. And people have, I think, a hard time understanding that. It's not that we have to be apolitical, but we cannot let our politics influence how we operate. And the difficult thing is that, it's not difficult. We have to obey the lawful orders of those appointed over us. The question of whether or not an order is lawful or not is what is not normally at issue. And so when General Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was faced with that. And whomever the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is in the coming months will be potentially faced with what is he or she going to do in the event that she is giving an order that is unlawful. For example, the use of military in policing action in the continental United States falls under posse comitatus. There's a limitation to what the military can do. Now, even though the president-elect says he's going to use the U.S. military for certain things that it sounds like extend into the realm of law enforcement, that's unconstitutional. It is not a lawful order. So how will it manifest? We don't know. For contemporaries of mine who are still in active duty and in senior rank positions, my experience with them is that they will endeavor to do the right thing based on the oath that they gave to the Constitution of the United States. Now, there are some who may not feel that way. They may feel like they're going to do something other than that in pursuit of some other goal. But my gut feeling is, for those that I know, that they are going to do the right thing.
That's good to hear, because as I heard Derek talk about serving the Constitution, that being important, being of the military, it seems like those that we're finding, there are going to be some caveats found, and with today's appointed Supreme Court leaders, there could be some workarounds and some changes on the horizon.
That's a good question, because if you've been looking at the news over the last several days, that's been a hot topic of discussion about the newly elected president giving unlawful orders. And if you base it on the relationship he had with General Milley and some of the other personnel, it was a very fragile, fraught relationship. Now, as you go into this next term and you start replacing people, loyalists or whatever you want to call it, it is going to severely test, I think, the Constitution, because we all take an oath to defend the Constitution. We don't take an oath to any individual, any person, but it's going to test that as they look to, I'm not sure what the correct term is, as they look to push a specific agenda, whether it's an agenda of revenge, whether it's an agenda of going after personnel, free press, like they did in 1932 with that guy over in Germany. So you can see a lot of similarities and the actions being taken, the attacks on your political opponents, attacks on everyday citizens, attacks on free press, and look at some of the things that are being conducted. And it's going to take some very strong people in the military in key positions to ensure that we are not being used and weaponized against American citizens, regardless of the belief. So,
What do you call that? Stress testing. Stress testing. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen.
Well, as they replace politicians with loyalists, then it becomes a whole different ballgame. And when they start putting in civilians into offices that are against that best interest of that office, then I'm starting to wonder about how this thing is going to hold.
You know, Eric, that's valid, right? Because right now, say for example, the SecDef is General Austin, and you know, General Austin was a tactical officer when I was a cadet at West Point. He was in the next company over. He was the tactical officer. He was a major at the time for E Company, uh, and he's huge. He's a big dude, and
Yeah.
he has that
6'6".
barreling voice,
Yeah.
and when he speaks, you listen. And so he was, you know, in the Army. I'd run across him here and there over the years. But you know, as the SecDef, he's going to uphold, you know, the standard, right?
yes.
That he's upheld from the time he was a lieutenant or when he graduated from West Point himself. So yes, the fear is who gets placed in that SecDef position, and now as that senior civilian in the Pentagon, what he or she is agreeing to and trying to direct the generals to do, you know? And so the question comes to mind: at what point do you put your rank down on the table and say, I'm not going to be a part of this? You know, because there may come a point in time in which there is a military leader who cannot, in good faith or in good conscience, abide by something that they're being told, because it, in their estimate, and in the estimate of the lawyers or whomever, is not consistent with the Constitution.
Yeah.
And they will have a decision to make. Am I going to comply with this unlawful order, or am I going to put my rank on the table? Now, the thing I was always told is that, you know, when you put your rank on the table, they're going to find somebody else to come and fill that position, you know.
Mhm.
But I wonder. I suspect that's going to happen at some point, and then now what happens next? Because it's not beyond my belief that there is somebody in the military right now who's rising up the ranks, or maybe close to getting up, who will be willing to subordinate the Constitution or what they're supposed to be doing to whatever their personal goals are or aspirations are. I hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah. Moving on. I mean, you know, I'm trying how to frame this. Is there anything you wish civilians understood about military service that, I don't know, that they still don't get?
Civilians know nothing about the military. It's everything they get from the military is from movies and shit like that. They have no clue whatsoever.
Yeah.
So yeah, they know nothing.
Yeah. I feel.
Only civilian you ever will know that come across that will know anything about the military was in the military. But yeah, they don't have a clue.
I feel there should be mandatory service. If I was president, mandatory 2 years like other countries.
Mhm.
And if you didn't want to serve directly in a military organization, you could do conservation, infrastructure, whatever in service of the country. Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of things are being lost in that way. You know, freedom ain't free, as they say. And, just service above self.
Yeah, for me, I wish the civilians understood the military values.
Yeah.
Even where, regardless of what service you're in, there's a set of values that we live by, and it's not just a warrior ethos. It's understanding of that, um, and how that value set guides a lot of the actions of the military and the things that we do in the military. And not to say that every person in the military lives by those values. There's a
Hmm.
foundation that is set, but in the military, you come and you learn what those values are. Whether it's, I think one of the Air Force ones is service before self. I'm not sure if I got that right, Derek. Um, the Army's got we have our value set as well. The Marines. So understanding that values and how that guides us, and how we act and do things, and how we raise our families, raise our kids, um, and the pride of service. I think over the years, especially the last 20 years, there's that sense of loss of pride in service. I think less than 1% serve nowadays. When we were growing up, not that all
Yeah.
of our parents wanted us to go to the military, but it was spoken about, or we knew somebody who did serve, or a family member that had served. Now we have a generation of younger people that think if they come to the military, they are going to be damaged when they get out, or something's going to happen, or we're fighting an unjust cause, things of that nature. So that universal pride of being in the military, that comes around Veterans Day and Memorial Day, when they confuse the two,
Yes, I hate that.
will leave quickly sometime after tomorrow, and it'll be back to other things. So, but there's complexities that also comes with military life,
Yeah.
and it's a challenge on kids. It's a challenge on younger ones. It's a challenge on the person serving, based on, I'm not sure. Bill's probably a one, birthdays missed, graduations missed, this missed, because you're deployed or something to that nature, and having to address those with your children. As you know, you're, 1 minute they're riding a bike, next minute they're asking for car keys, and you've missed a great deal because you have been out serving the country to make sure that they're giving opportunities to do things we may not have been able to do as younger people. So for
Yeah.
me, it's the value set.
And I also think about, especially for us, I mean, this everybody here is of color, is how, like, with our parents, the military was a step up in our what I call our caste system, to rise on up toward middle class and beyond. And the military was an option or a leg up to be able to do that. And I could say, like, with my dad served in the Air Force, and yeah, I mean, it was a dude from Akron, Ohio, and that was a way out. And it would be different if he didn't take that route. I mean, at least me being here, sitting with y'all. So, um, looking at it as a viable career thing, I think it's still important. In and around the war stuff that may present itself, but it's still, I feel like, a viable career option for young people. And I just will say, though, to the officers here, um, I wish there was, like, what you call, like, the green to gold, or like a Maverick program. So things weren't so stratified with the schools as opposed to ROTC and stuff like that. Um, no, so um, I also, do you feel let me rephrase this question. When I got out in 2011, I came across it was like an informal kind of study that was on Reddit, and it was that officers who got out were hired at a faster rate than enlisted personnel. And I thought that to be very interesting, because there's always the joke, if you said something to a senior NCO, if you misidentified them as an officer, they would always respond, "I work for a living," and so it's just interesting about pathways and how one maximizes those pathways and opportunities. Um, I do have a question though for the academy folk. Is it true that whether it's the Army, Navy, Air Force Academy, you all get a cow your junior year? Can you talk about that?
So I don't. That's the first I've ever heard it said like that. So at West Point, are you being? Is this a? Are you? I don't know if you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. This is how.
Okay, so at a West Point, and I don't know Navy. You have different nicknames for what you are or what your class is called. So a freshman is called a plebe.
Right.
Uh, a sophomore is called a yearling. A junior is called a cow, and a senior is called a firstie. So they refer to so and so. Oh yeah, our cow year, he was doing something, whatever. That means your junior year. And I don't think the Navy has the same exact names, and I don't know about the Air Force either. But so that's what cow means to me as a West Point person.
I'm talking about the money though. Like there's like these like low interest, no
Okay,
money loan.
so
I'm sorry, that's what I meant by
oh, okay.
yeah.
So back when I was a cadet, between your senior and your junior and your first year, your senior year, you would get a loan. You could get a car loan or loan to use for whatever. I was thinking about this yesterday, but generally it was used as a car loan. So I think when I was going on to senior, I got $11,000 for a car loan, and it was, I don't know what the interest rate was, but it was not an interest rate that somebody with no established credit should get. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I got that loan, and then I was able to buy my first little car. It was a Mazda RX-7, and that's what I was driving around my senior year at West Point. So that's what that.
Ballin'.
That was my first car at my first base. RX-7.
Yeah, they were dope. They had the rotary engine. But if I had it all back again, I'd have bought $11,000 worth of Apple stock and just kept walking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, because I think for the younger Army guys and some Marines, it's always been like the Dodge Hellcat. It's or the Chargers. That's like the popular car for the youngins.
I had a 1984 Grand Prix was my first car.
Wow. See?
I still had the bill of sales for that car was $5,000. I bought it in '88, so it was what, 4 years old?
Right.
$5,600. I was like, man, the prices are out of crazy. You know how much you would pay for a 4-year-old car now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you guys were to show up at Shaker, hypothetically, you showed up at Shaker with your uniforms on or whatever, what would you tell a young Shaker student about enlisting? What would you say? What piece of wisdom would you pass on to them?
Go to the Air Force. Don't mess with that other stuff. I mean, we would always have Army guys and Marines and Navy guys come to Air Force bases, and taking an Army guy to chow on an Air Force base is is something that you just have to look at them and watch their faces because they think we're putting on something special for them, and it's just regular everyday life in the Air Force. I'm gonna say like this, and I love the other branches, Marines, Army, Navy, but if you just want a job, you want to go home and be damn near a civilian, join the Air Force.
But wasn't that his question? What would you ask him about joining the military?
Yeah, he said
Yeah.
to join.
So how did
join
the Air Force answer that?
Huh?
You knew it was gonna come sooner or later.
Here we go.
I mean, hey, who wants to go sleep in a tent when you can go home and sleep in your bed? I mean, let's keep it real.
And that reminds me when Bill brought up Panama. You know, I was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Mm-hmm. So when Panama happened, our jets flew cover. We went out, we actually loaded them up, missiles, everything, tanks to full 9, kicked them out. And I did notice that they were gone for about, 15, 18 hours. It was like, we were like, when are these jets coming back? I mean, and that's when and afterwards we found out what really was going on in Panama. And we found out our jets had flew cover for them. Wow. I mean, those pilots were wore the hell out when they came back. So it's like, yeah, we kicked those jets out and went to the NCO club.
Exactly.
How they was fighting the war. Like, you can't beat it.
Oh man.
Are there any conflicts between the corps like we see in those movies like Top Gun? You see the Army guys getting to fight with the Marines or the Air Force guys. Does that happen, or is that just in the movies?
Nah. When I was a cadet, the very first year for Army Navy game, we went down on the field. We were at Veterans Stadium, and so the Corps cadets and the midshipmen, they all march on, right?
Yeah,
it's pretty ceremonious, pretty nice. And then after the walk on, I don't know what happened. Like a Navy midshipman, whatever, went and grabbed one of our little mascots and ran off with it. And so there was like a big thing, and they were like, please don't let that guy get away. And so we ran and tackling and fighting going on. And that was the last time there was ever any, physical conflict that I saw between, a branch. Because once you get out in the military, it's all everybody working together, So I love Air Force Chow. I love Air Force Air Staff. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm happy to hand off the static line and jump out of it, but if I had to be in an aircraft, whether it be a C-17 or C-5 or C-130, I know the Air Force is going to do what it needs to do, and Navy guys, man, when I was in Ranger School, some of the baddest dudes there were those SEALs. I give it up for the SEAls because those are some bad dudes. And downrange, so we had some task force operations in our AO where, you got a combination of the Air Force ops guys and the Army ops guys, Force Recon, there were some dudes there and the Navy SEALs. And when they come into your area and you're working them, to do a mission, it's going to be tight. So no, we all have to be on the same sheet of music. And I felt good when they were in our AO. I just told them, look, don't mess up something that now we're going to have to deal with when y'all leave, right? Because they'll come in there and break stuff. And then now we got to try to explain to the civilians what's going on. But no, for real, I think from a military perspective, any acrimony between the branches is more or less Hollywood hyperbole.
A bunch of jokes that we can say to each other, but don't let nobody else come in and try to talk bad about us. Because I was going to tell Derek, they should have stopped that failed experiment in 1948.
You know, that's the thing, Jeff, is that the Air Force, you know, it used to be the Army Air Corps, right? They
Yes.
wanted to get out, they wanted to move and get their own house, and they didn't want to be home anymore. And then now they're getting all of our money. The money that should be going to the Army, they're getting all the money because they got these new planes that they want to get all the time, and they build a new fancy housing areas. Meanwhile, the parent of the whole Air Force, the Army, we're broke, we're struggling. That's why we have to be intense, because we're giving the Air Force all of our money.
Yeah, and then what's your thoughts on the Space Force? Any thoughts on
Beam
that?
me up, Scotty.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say about that. Do they do anything?
sit in front of computers.
Well,
I don't.
you know, we already had a space command before a declaration of the Space Force, you know, and all these space ops, that was already a thing. So they just repackaged and renamed it and did some other stuff, you know. I don't know. I suspect that they could have continued doing what they were doing without having created that thing.
Yeah, what was it called under Reagan? There were supposed to be some satellites that would be able to take
Star
out.
Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
Is it Star Wars? Okay.
Yeah, strategic defense.
SDI.
Yeah, strategic defense initiative. That's a whole nother thing, though.
Yeah, that's more akin to what Israel has in their own way, the Iron Dome. So we have a question from fellow Moreland person, Billy Abshaw. And you guys might have touched upon this. What is the one thing you like civilians to know about the military and military service? Anybody want to take that one?
I don't know. It was when I enlisted, and well, after basic training, everything like that, the military was nothing like I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was the people. I mean, it was a lot better than I ever expected.
Pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought somebody was just gonna be standing in my ass every day in, day out. All you know, I thought I, wasn't gonna be able to joke around or anything like that. It was nothing like I thought it was gonna be. Even in basic training, I mean, like Dave said, we went and we were like 21, and even in basic training, I was laughing my ass off at people just the stupid shit that they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you get an idea, like I said, off the movies. You get an idea about the military, people yelling at you all the time. You can't speak your mind or anything like that. And it's totally different. I mean, it was I enjoyed my experience. I met a ton of good people.
Yeah.
And
Same for me. I was stationed in Florida, so I was Fort Walton Beach, Florida. So I'm looking at white sands, beaches. I'm going to FAMU, driving down to FAMU on the weekends. Great. I mean, like I said, I got lifetime friends out of that. That I still keep in contact with, and the opportunity to to see some of the world, to be able to travel and get different experience. It a great experience. I wouldn't give up for anything else.
Coming out of Shaker, our experience in the 70s and 80s was different than I would suspect most of the country back then. I was in terms of the environment we grew up in, the diversity, the demographic. I said diversity, and the experience that we had with a bunch of people who other people didn't get the opportunity to do that. And when we left and went into the military environment, at least my perspective is that our eyes were open to the possibilities with regards to people interacting and getting along and working together regardless of their background. And what I found in the military, perhaps increasingly so, over the years, is that was a manifestation of things that we had already witnessed in Shaker in terms of working together. And we talked about it way back at the beginning. Part of the difficulty with seeing some of the things we're seeing today is that there are people there who we served with, who we have gone down range with, who we consider to be very close, that it would appear espoused to be or appear to espouse some fundamental beliefs that are very far from where we are on things. But I thought I knew these people, you know. But I would say that the military, in terms of putting aside superficial things, the things that aren't really that important, and working together towards a common, mutually important end or goal, that's where you see it done. And out here in the civilian world, you see people who would make you believe that it can't be done. And you have politicians who thrive on and take advantage of fear and the differences people have in order to advance their agenda, when in reality, we probably have a lot more in common than we have that's different. And we have the ability to do a lot more together than we do apart. But we got a lot of people here who want to make us believe that it can't be done when it can be done. And we see it done every day in the military. So that's why I would say about that. You know,
take this as a metaphor. Every time I watch, and I think I like to compare football that would be most directly related to the military, because you have people from all over the country, from all parts of the nation, all so different socioeconomic experiences, and they have to come together in quote unquote battle and have to have the same mindset. And I always think of the BOSAs. They're very different political outlook compared to the people that they're playing with. And then you have also the ownership, as well as you have league officials and what have you. So you're a team of differences that have to come together for a common goal and actually go to battle with each other. And that's how I see the Army, because, you know, in no other circumstances would these people come together to move forward and to be victorious with each other, because they're so diametrically opposing each other. Is that a good metaphor for what the military is like, from a civilian not having served in the military? That's how I see how those people come together and work in as a common goal.
I don't know that they're so diametrically opposed. I think that, you know, in terms of, because I was looking today, because Bosa, San Francisco was playing there, and I was like, you know, I wonder how his teammates feel about him and his
actions,
MAGA stuff, you know. But I will tell you, nowadays, just based on at least my view, you know, a lot of these soldiers, even though they're coming from different places, they are more attuned to a broader perspective or spectrum of culture than they would have been back in our day, right? Because there wasn't the media ability or the various forms of media to have people communicate, right? Hell, even back then, at the start, MTV wasn't all that integrated, right?
Yeah.
So there wasn't, for most of America, they had no visibility on anything other than what it might have been on the news and so on and so forth. I think that has changed. And so it's easier for people to relate to one another now. When they get together and they learn and they live in close proximity and they interact, and then that, you know, increases it. So they may not have been so much diametrically opposed, but they were unaware of, you know, certain things. But and I don't want to sound like I'm being Pollyanna, right? Because I'm not, and it wasn't perfect in Shaker, but it was so far ahead of most other places that you can't dismiss what we had in Shaker. You know what I'm saying? So we come home from having voluntary, like I said, I got on the bus and went voluntarily up to Mercer. It wasn't so much volunteer. My mother told me I was going to do it, but I'm just saying it was a voluntary program. And then we come home and look at TV and what we see happen in Boston.
Yeah.
I remember it was stark in terms of the difference between what we were experiencing every day. And it was hard. Why are they like that in Boston? Why is it such a problem? Because I have no problem up at Mercer. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it's about perspective. And so I think the perspective that you have in the military, even with all this stuff going on outside, is what it can be. And
I will also
go ahead. That's it.
Yeah, I will also say, it's interesting coming from Shaker. Like, I came in as an enlisted, but there was definitely some haterism going on at least for me at that level from white or black enlisted. On the black side, because you talked proper and just like a demeanor. So, I remember getting some grief from a senior NCO who was then put in his place by another one. And then, even on the white side of things, the comments, oh, you're articulate, you're so intelligent, and so I always looked at it, at least in my experience, it was like cognitive dissonance coming through the areas I came through. And in terms of how people were trying to place you or put you into something that they felt comfortable with in that regard. So, like I said, it wasn't a criticism, just an observation, coming from Shaker and interfacing with the general world at large. And to your point, you realize on a certain level, you might have been ahead of certain things. So,
did you guys? I have to inject this. Did you watch the Colorado game last night against Texas Tech?
yeah.
Did you feel the tension in that game? Did you feel? I felt racial tension because the crowd was getting really involved. I saw a hand signal that was this in the crowd. I'm going to go back on the internet and see if I see that again. And I just saw.
He was blatant with it.
Oh yeah, so you saw it too. Okay. So I also saw how Colorado started to put it on them and started turning it up. And luckily, the coach of Texas Tech had coached Deion Sanders Jr. in college or
like 2009.
Yeah. So they had a relationship. But I can only imagine what that could have turned into if that relationship hadn't been fostered.
I would also know to say about that game, they have this quirky tradition, Texas Tech, of throwing tortillas on the field, but it felt like they were throwing more than tortillas on the field. And in that regard, and then the horrible jersey design by Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Confederate gray and scarlet red. Corny colors. I mean, like the back of their jerseys, like if they got dirty, you couldn't read their names and stuff like that. I mean, I know that's neither here or there. I'm just, riffing on on that game.
And then the taunting started, and then it was almost like a microcosm of society. Colorado started taunting them, and they were falling for the crowd, pushing them to that point. If they played their game and kept their heads into the game, they started losing the game, and it got closer than it should be. So there are all these little storylines that reflected the week from my point of view. I'm waiting to see, what's his name? Jones. I forgot how you say his first name. Just see how some of the internet starts to address this game, because this game was very post-election, and I'd like to see what people are going to have. Has anyone read about any of that stuff today or what have you? I'm sure in the week it's going to come up. It has to. And I'm glad, Dave, you saw what I saw, because I went directly to the internet immediately, because I remember during the Dodgers game, if you saw the woman behind home plate in the first game of the World Series, she was wearing a Make America Great Again baseball hat, red. She was like right dead center. So you could see her at every pitch. And I went to the internet and it was there. There's all these little agitations in the news that reflect society, and I want to see what's made of those things.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I watched that game, but I didn't see the hand signal.
Oh yeah.
I was surprised they stayed on him that long, because I mean, the guy was doing it. He was doing it blatantly.
They kept coming back to him.
And they kept putting them on, and they kept putting them on. I was like, wow, they don't give a damn.
I'm looking for this now. What hand signal? What was he doing?
White power.
Oh,
It's the same one that they do that at Army
means KKK or something, some shit.
In 2016, wasn't that prevalent? Yeah. And then they said it was something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to. I know what you're talking about. That's that thing where they try to get you to look at their hand, and then if you do, when they're doing that, then you get to punch them or something. That's what they were trying to say that was, versus it was being a white supremacist thing. And I've seen people do that little game where I can't get it up on the camera, where they do that, that thing, ooh, you look, and that I saw that way back when I was in college. I don't know why that was a fun thing, but the fact is that now it has multiple contexts, right? Because then which fraternity has that as a symbol?
The Kappas.
Right. And then so I saw somebody try to flip that around. I'm like, well, don't the Kappas, doesn't one of those fraternities do that? Because that's the way things are. So they were saying, see, it could be interpreted in multiple ways. But that guy, if he's doing it for the camera, chances are he's doing it specifically for the purpose that you think he's doing it for.
Exactly.
But he's got some plausible deniability if asked about it.
But isn't Texas Tech's hand signal like guns up or acting like you're shooting?
That's what I
always thought it was.
That's what I thought it was too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Texas Tech does that. Texas does the hook 'em horns or whatever, but I've never seen Texas Tech do that.
Yeah, well, we saw it last night, right, David?
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it last night.
Charge times, cool heads, stay low, keep firing. Praise the Lord, pass the ammunition.
I saw this great thing about control your own thermostat.
Right. Exactly.
There's one thing I wanted to add, when we talk about what we think, what we wish, address Billy's question. I'd like, back when we went in the military, 80s, early 90s, it was more of people thought that if you were going to the military, you weren't smart enough to go to college. You weren't intelligent, that you couldn't do anything else. And I always felt that with engaged and informed leadership during that time period, the young people who were in basic training, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or whatever, they had a better understanding of what was going on in the world than a lot of the college personnel. We always thought the best and brightest were at Harvard, Yale, Brown, Case Western, one of those schools. but I think the young men and women in the military at that point were giving straightforward information. It wasn't flawed. It wasn't spin to meet my agenda. It was, this is what's going on. This is what we know, and we'll let you know more when the time's appropriate and as we get more accurate information. And I think with the 24-hour news service circle, that has changed over the years. But I always thought some of the people I joined with were some of the most intelligent people in the world. And that's not taking anything from the kids who go to college or the young people who go to college, but it was just, for some people, college wasn't for everybody.
Yeah.
In terms
There
of
was
doing
that same connotation about community college, but I think it's the smartest thing to do
at this point in time, yeah.
economically. And you show me an academic, I'll show you them in academia. That's how I view academics. It's white papers, it's studies, but it isn't always, to me, reality.
And
Well,
Jeff,
I mean,
and like Jeff, like you said, when I went to college right after high school, I didn't have a clue about what was going on in the world. If it wasn't going on right around me, I didn't know. And once I did go to the Air Force, I started paying attention to a whole lot of different things. I mean, a lot of things opened up, and you grow up. You grow up a lot more than you would. Well, I grew up a lot more than I would had I not gone to the military, because I didn't have a clue.
You know, it's funny. The elitists are looked upon as being snobs and not caring about the working class, and that's where we are. Look how that's turned around. And you put people that know about things, or people that are grounded because they're on the ground. And about the election, it was, you keep telling us these things are right, but you're not listening to us. You're not hearing that prices are up on eggs and prices are up on bread, and I got to work 3 jobs to be able to keep up. But the Democrats are saying, well, look at the economy, look at the interest rates, look at inflation is going down, but they're not speaking the same language. And then the so-called elites are looked upon as, oh, you don't really care about us. You just use us during election time, and you're not listening to us. So I think that's what caused what happened. And you look at someone, I know I'm getting political, but I have to bring that in to perspective. One thing they said about Clinton was that he could convey a simple message because he spoke in the verbiage of the general public. And with Trump, he says a lot of locker room stuff, but they can relate to him, and then they can believe him because of that. So elitism has really needs to be checked, because if you look at college, that's a lot of money being spent for not being guaranteed a career, and it can almost guarantee you lifelong debt if you're not from a family that has the means to provide that for you.
Eric, I wonder though, all these postmortems that are being done after this election, I wonder, people are out there kind of grasping for straws, trying to figure it out, right? And for all of the rationales that are being put out there that how somehow Trump communicates to people, I'm skeptical of that, because a lot of the things he says are semi-incoherent, and then they are also just virulent in terms of the way he's saying things. And there are people that voted for Obama and somehow voted for Trump. There are people that understood, when Obama was talking, that, it's not like they don't no longer can understand what somebody who is erudite and articulate, as you said, Gabe. It's not like they don't understand that anymore. And the fact of the matter, if Obama or Kamala Harris were speaking like Trump, they would have a problem with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They're like, that's not presidential.
true. Yeah, the rules aren't the
You
same.
wear a tan suit without being accused of not being presidential. So I don't think that's it. And they know enough about economics, even though none of them had ever studied it. They know what's going on in terms of what happened when it started to go bad, and then who's responsible. I think it's easy for Fox News and Newsmax and all these other ones to try to blame stuff on the Biden administration or Kamala Harris. And then the people are willing to accept it. It's confirmation bias. They already believe it. They already want to believe it, and they're willing to go with it. When the fact of the matter is, a lot of times, Biden can't control the gas prices.
Exactly.
And so when they say, and a lot of things stem from fuel prices, right? But then when they say, well, drill, baby, drill. Well, you know what? There's more oil production on U.S., out of the U.S. now than ever before. So it's not a lack of oil production here in the United States. But when you have them talking and telling Trump or someone else telling so many lies in succession, it's hard to fact check them.
Right.
It gets
The only person I've
normalized.
seen that can actually keep up with them on their lies and hold them to account is the transportation secretary. They can't mess with him. He'll go on Fox News into the lion's den and tear him up. But everywhere else,
Pete Buttigieg.
yeah, Buttigieg, yeah, he can talk. But everywhere else, you got people saying foolishness, and there's no check, and then it's almost like perception becomes reality.
So what is are they capitalizing our best resource in America? Ignorance. That's what I think.
Yeah,
that it is.
I think and then if you say that though, then they'll say that you're insulting them.
Yeah, and
saying that they're garbage people, or they're ignorant, or they're stupid, or something like that. Well, you know what? The information you are receiving, and even the ones that were supposed to be doing their own research, and they weren't doing any research, about COVID. Do your own research. Okay. All of that leads you to draw conclusions about their ability to use the scientific process to make evaluations. But without casting aspersions, the bottom line is they've come to believe some things via either misinformation or worse, disinformation, deliberate disinformation by certain entities. And that to them has become reality. And you can't tell them otherwise.
No.
So that really, when you talk about the overall fear is now, how do you change somebody who is how do you get to or influence or somebody who is so ingrained in a certain position where there's no discussion. And I think that's the biggest fear, right? Because if it comes down to it now, where are we? Is it just a matter of a fight? Yeah. Are we to that point where we can't communicate and we can only fight? I don't know.
That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. What I found interesting the other day was can't remember what Fox News guy it was, and he was talking about if he found out that his wife was voting for Kamala because they were saying women were going and acting like they were going to be voting for Donald Trump, and they were voting for Kamala, that he would feel like she was having an affair on him, that she was cheating on him. But what made it more laughable was the one that he made that comment about was the woman he cheated on his first wife with.
No.
So you start talking about the values of some of the people that have a platform and the people that are listening to them. There seems to be a lack of values overall in a lot of people in those positions to make comments. I would be hesitant to talk about my wife cheating on me, and she's the person I cheated on my first wife with. I don't think anybody on this right now, this stream, or Barack Obama can have got away with that. None of that stuff.
No.
And been able to talk about, well, Michelle would have killed him anyway, but there's a value set that does not exist in the MAGA party anymore, I don't think.
Well, when you
Unless
start flooding the zone with mistruths and with low information, with a low information public and people that go to echo chambers to justify how they feel about certain things, there's no chance of writing that person, however you want to state that. To introduce, they'll never find what the truth really is, if there is a truth to something. So it's propaganda on steroids right now. You know, in 1939, there was only so many news sources, and the newspaper played an important role. Now, and then we used to only have 3 networks, which helped control these things. It helped impeach Nixon, but now it's just out of hand. There's too many sources. People are relying on their news from Joe Rogan and Instagram and non-traditional source. Those are the real news sources. It's not even the 24-hour news anymore.
You know, Citizens United, you know, I saw these ads for the used car salesman. You know, he was clearly lying, right, about what Sherrod Brown supposedly supported. You know, for those of you in Ohio, you've seen him. He supported transgender playing sports, and he voted for operations for kids to be transgender and so on and so forth. Well, no, there were no such votes. And if you look at it, like their little note at the bottom, it had something that was nonsensical. It took Brown forever to counter those ads, but they were effective. You know, he voted for schools to allow biological boys to play with girls. Well, there was no vote in Congress for that. You know, schools are controlled at the state level. But nonetheless, people were ready to believe that. Some people who, you know, should be smart enough to know better. But that's what they did. And it worked. And now that dude is going to be a senator.
Bernie Moreno.
The same dude that cheated his own employees out of their overtime pay. Had to admit it. Oh, and tried to cover it up. And there's documentation to prove that. This is what I was talking about when you look at it from a military perspective, leadership perspective. There are people in Congress who haven't earned the right to be in those positions of responsibility, because that's what they are. They're responsibility, positions of responsibility, and leadership requires leaders, and they are not responsible, nor are they leaders. But they're there. And that's what we have to deal with. They are unserious people when it comes to the business of this nation.
They have their own agenda.
Yeah.
They're getting a check.
Yeah.
They're getting the benefits.
The benefits and figuring out ways to get more money.
Yeah.
Off the books. And so I think that's where we
accountability is lost out here.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know it's gonna take a turn around though, you know.
Well, it probably has to go through this period of darkness until the ship rights itself, where people are put in position to right it.
Yeah.
And you know, the consequences. Yeah, I mean, folks are getting away with a lot of stuff because they've been enabled.
Yeah.
So, anything? Where's my last question? Because I know we're about to almost hit two hours of your time. Who's been back? Well, a couple of y'all are already in the area, so this is a redundant question. Have you noticed anything significant? Have you noticed any significant changes in the community there in Shaker, if you've been back to the area? Well, you know, scratch that question.
Yeah,
Scratch that
that's so broad.
Yeah, so broad. maybe as a last question, throwing this out there, what are some of the things you miss about being in the service, and what are some of the things you're glad to have left behind for those?
I'll answer that first because I got to jump off.
Okay.
Kind of like somebody else was saying earlier, I did love my job. I worked on F-15s. I was a radar tech, radar navigation, and working on the plane and doing something that I really actually enjoyed doing was great, for me. I mean, compared to now, something I tell my kids and my grandkids, you always want to be able to do something that you love.
Yeah.
You love what you do. That's what you really want to be able to do, whether it's working for yourself or working for somebody doing something. You want to be able to really love and enjoy what you do. And
Right.
that's one thing about the Air Force. My goal was to stay in for 8 years, or how long for me to get a degree before I got out. But know your goals, know your aspirations. I think a lot of these young people coming up now, because they're growing up in the social media world and they see so many different things, they get an unrealistic idea of what it takes to survive in the society that we're in now.
Right.
And we have to be able to teach these young kids that, especially these young men, that what you see these rappers doing and what you see some of these ball players, some of these other people doing is not necessarily always the way. And they're blessed and they're lucky. But at some point, to get down, you have to work. You have to love the work that you do if you want to survive in this society.
Yeah. Exactly. Anybody else?
I'm like Dave. I was a jet engine mechanic in the Air Force, so I miss, working on F-15s, F-111s. We fix jets and then just go sit and just watch them launch all the time. I miss that a lot. I miss the people that we work with in the hangars and stuff like that. Things that I didn't like about the military. I really can't think of too many things I really didn't like about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So.
Can I ask you something real quick that's changed me as a civilian with what's been going on here last 10 years or so? How do you feel military from the standpoint of a pride of being an American citizen, and how that parlays with your military experience, how that plays? Do you have more pride being an American because you're in the military? That just came across in my mind. Address that how you want, but that's how I think about it. I would think maybe like being a part of a team, fighting for the same goal and being in those circumstances where you have to come together. Do you feel more of a pride of being an American because you served your country in the military?
So, go ahead.
Real quick, I would say yeah, because I never really thought about it until I went into the military.
Yeah, same here for me. Is when you sign that dotted line, like you say, you support the Constitution, you have something that you're truly fighting for, and you're truly taking some type of honor for it and respect for what you're doing. I think it means a lot, and it does help to build that character. And it's like, hey, you do stand for something. You do, you're doing something, with a full purpose. You feel, hey, yeah, I am defending the country. Me fixing this jet and kicking it out here is gonna help defend this country. So yeah, there's a lot of honor and pride in that.
But with the struggle and with things that have taken place, for instance, I feel a certain kind of way when I would attend a sports, when my kids were playing sports. I'd really have to think if I'd really want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem. I felt a certain kind of way. How did that change with our struggle still being of color in this country? Did that sort of damage that in any way, or because of your military experience, you still have, you know what that takes? You still have that, you carry that pride.
Hey, well, I'll say this. So when it comes to that sort of thing, I look at it like our service is a very personal thing. And it's not to, I don't look at it in a jingoistic way. Like at the games, like a baseball game, you know, you'll see people that are all USA, USA, right? And they sing God Bless America. I had some dude tell me to take my hat off, take your hat off, because I hadn't taken it off fast enough. And I was ready to confront him because number one, God Bless America isn't an official anthem that requires you to take your hat off. It's a song. But I say that to say that at least for me, my feeling of being an American is neither confirmed nor denied by my having been in the military. But it serves to others, I think, as a verification when it doesn't need to. But we as African Americans always had some need to validate our bona fides when it comes to being an American, from Crispus Attucks to the Massachusetts 54th to the Harlem Hellfighters, through the 34th Infantry Regiment in Korea, all the way to the Bloods in Vietnam. It's always been a matter of how can we prove that this is our country too.
Yeah.
And it's to the point now where, you know, we shouldn't have to do that anymore. I was telling a friend of mine that I was out on the mall in DC. I was working at FEMA. And so we wore our dress uniform, a Class A uniform every day. Didn't always wear the coat, but we wore the pants and the tie. And so anyhow, I went out on the mall. This is 2016, either shortly after the election or the inauguration or whatever. And I was wearing my full dress uniform with all the medals and all that other stuff. You know, you could see. Yeah. And so there are a lot of people in the red hats, and I'm getting a lot of thank you for your services and so on and so forth. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, whatever. And I'm walking, they're just kind of taking everything in. And I'm thinking to myself, what if I didn't have this uniform on? What would they be thinking about me?
Yeah.
And the fact that I have to ask that question, or that I have to that speaks to where we are in this nation, because I shouldn't have to feel that way, you know? So the service I don't think it's changed how I feel about being American, because I will tell you, in these little mahalas in Baghdad or over in South Korea or when I was in Afghanistan, you get an appreciation for what we have here that those people don't. Those people would love to have just a small bit of what we take for granted here in the United States.
Yeah.
So my appreciation of the United States may have been influenced by seeing that, and a reminder that even as bad as it gets, we got it a lot better,
right,
than what other people have, and we don't appreciate that. A lot of us don't. But there's always in the back of my mind that thing that has been there since Crispus Attucks and beyond. Why do I have to prove my Americanism?
Yeah,
I earned this, and so have our ancestors.
100%. That's why, you know, for me, like, you know, I have the Afghan war sticker veteran thing on my truck. Got the veteran plates and stuff like that. And I feel it's very important because, it's like, yeah, family, kinfolk, the community at large, we have skin in the game here. And
Literally.
yeah. And, even like we are Americans, whether we like it or not, because when we're overseas, and I've said this before, when shit goes down overseas and you're American, you're making a beeline to the embassy and you're using your American entitlements, whether we have those entitlements, whether we like it or not, whether or not we flaunt them or not. And you can't tell me if you happen to be over in an unstable place, you're going to be like, fuck my American status, what have you. So, but as people of color, I feel, yeah, it's a very nuanced thing when the Pledge of Allegiance and Star Spangled Banner, it's, yeah, our people got blood up in that flag. And so got to respect that and honor them in the way you can. And I'm sorry, like when you're out in the field, it ain't so much about the flag. It's about your friend, your squad member. That's who you're fighting for. I mean, so,
And I wish that would filter over back into the civilian life, how we cared about each other here.
Don't worry, it's coming. When Luxor of the Galaxy Foundation is coming to take over the earth, we will all band together against a common enemy. It's coming.
That's what it's going to take, it seems.
It's coming. The fast radio bursts that they're picking up and can't decipher yet, that's the enemy. They're coming.
Comic book lovers, is there a Marvel movie? I said this on Facebook today. This reminds me of a Marvel movie where all the villains, the super villains, have been released. Is there a Marvel movie that reflects that?
Not a Marvel movie. There's DC Comics that have reflected that, but not anything in Marvel.
Suicide Squad. Closest is Thanos. That's the threat everybody got to get up against.
Gabe done lost it.
We got to bring some levity to this, man.
True that.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, before we go, I was appreciative that you guys had sent pictures, and I wanted to share something and run it, and then we'll lead off, close the show. But this is in salute. Jeff, I got that last picture early. This has music. I'm about to play this, so I don't want it competing.
Okay. What was the tune?
They reminisce over you. P Rock CL Smooth.
Pete Rock and CL Smooth for
E-
93.
e- Everybody's dress uniform is so much better than the Air Force's.
Yeah, that's true. I
I'm
think
saying.
Marines had the
The
best.
Marines.
Marines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Marines have
Yeah.
the best. I mean, the
Hands down.
Army. I mean, Army and Marines, dude. The dress uniforms are beautiful. Air Force is just. Come on, we got to do better than that.
Bus
That's-
driver looking.
Exactly.
Those outlaws make up for it, though.
Yeah.
It gave, I know you're about to get up. I wanted to say one thing.
Yeah. No
I
rush.
think the bonds that we have formed at Shaker. So I had a veterans event yesterday, and I called Bill up to ask him to be the keynote speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill graciously accepted, came down, dropped some knowledge. I am still getting text messages about the words and comments Bill pushed out yesterday about military service, about family readiness groups, about being a veteran, and tying it to his youth, tying it to things that he's seen, to other people in the crowd, and being able to reach back to a classmate like that
Yeah.
meant a great deal. To be able to say, and it was weird because when we got there, Alvin Elder was with us, and it was I was like, I've known these guys for 50 years.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Crazy when you think about it. Yeah.
And you can go back and say, we all came from that same stock, that same platform foundation of being able to achieve, being successful, understanding what that is, having a work ethic that our parents put into us. You can give some of that to Shaker credit. Most of it goes to our parents,
Yeah.
but most of it goes to our peers as well, of the people that we engage with, were around all the time. But I just wanted to publicly say thank you to Bill for coming to speak. And,
Right on.
you know, Bill rushed himself off. He probably could have talked for like another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Grab the mic like he's on Soul Train.
Yeah, Bill rushed himself off, and it was like I said, I'm still getting text messages about the words that he gave to that the group that was there. So, Bill, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for being the man you are.
No, thank you for asking me to be a part of that. And I think, that's one thing we have is like, you know what? If one of us needs something or I ask for something, we'll make it happen, So I appreciate you asking, Jeff. Jeff came all the way up for Columbus for one of our shows. I had a show over the tree lawn.
Yeah.
And Jeff came all the way up from, surprised me. I didn't know he was coming up. And Mr. McIntyre was there. And it was one of those things, man. Shaker, we show out for each other, and then it's much appreciated.
And I will just say in another interview in the future about the Bill McRae, was it a quintet, sextet?
Yes, sometimes with 5, sometimes with all 6. So it was a sextet over at the Bop Stop last week.
And for those who are in the area, you need to check this man out. And I'll say it again: they'll smoke anybody.
Yeah, Bill's the beast.
So,
Bill's the beast. I've seen him work.
yes, do your thing. Well, hey, shout out to the other folks who couldn't make it. Alvin Elder, Mike Haskell, Craig, and who else? I think that might have been it. But also, in particular, this you guys had mentioned earlier, a Shaker person. Jeff, thank you for the update on his name, Kip Harrison.
Yeah.
Who was killed in action in Grenada. A shout out to him and his memory for those who knew him, his family, for laying down his life. So on this, Veterans Day. Shout out to all the other Shaker veterans, known and unknown. And that's all we got. Get your free food tomorrow if you're into that.
All day long.
Yeah.
There you go, Bill.
Next week.
Oh, next week we have Brian Sullivan.
Okay.
Sully, Brian Sullivan.
Class of 85, 86.
Yes, class of 85. Brian
85.
Sullivan. He got mad stories to tell. Thank you all who turned in on this Veterans Day episode of the Shaker Heights Experiences May Vary. Resiliency going forward to each and every one of you. And that's it. That's all we got. Thank you all for coming through, giving up your time, and connect again. Love, peace, hair grease, all that. Salute.
All right, so
Yeah, all right. Later, y'all.
Later.
Peace. Oh, wait a minute. I gotta hit the wrong button. Hold on. There we go. Wait.